The first one which we are going to take a look at is the so-called Immortal game. In this one, the opponent was Kieseritzky. The game was played in London, 1851. E4, E5, F4, so the King's Gambit. A very common opening for those times. E takes F4, Bishop C4, Queen H4 check, and King F1. So White sacrificed the pawn and his king already moved, but he builds his hopes on quick development, like playing Knight F3, attacking the queen on H4, and then playing D4, occupying the center. In this position, Black has many options. He played B5, which is an extremely rare move. It's basically a counter sacrifice. Even Kasparov played like this once. But nevertheless, of course, this is not the main or not the best option. So the point of this counter sacrifice is to decoy this bishop from attacking the f7 square. So the position will be a little bit more safe for Black at the beginning. So Knight f6, Knight f3, very normal developing moves. And now Queen h6 was played by Black. In my opinion, it was not needed, so it's a little bit strange looking move, so to say. Queen h5 was certainly possible. The f4 pawn doesn't need a protection right away, and Queen h5 is attacking the bishop on b5, so in this sense it also gains some time for further development. So Queen h6, d3, already eyeing the queen on h6, and Black played here knight to h5. The threat is very clear, so he wants to play knight to g3, using the fact that this rook on h1 is unprotected. But the problem is that it's moving the same minor piece for the second time. In the opening, and normally that's not a good strategy to do. So it's better to finish development. In my opinion, the best move was to play bishop c5, and in case of knight c3, just play c6. It's really a nice move to make this c6 because it takes away the d5 square from the knight, and also in case of bishop c4, many times Black can open the position with a d5 tempo. So instead knight h5 was played, and I believe Anderssen here returned a favor. He played the same strange move, knight h4. The problems are the same with knight h5 in my opinion, so it was just much more natural to play rook g1, and it already creates a threat of g4, because the pawn cannot take en passant since the queen is hanging, and if the knight retreats to f6, then g5 is going to win the piece. So Black has to play something like g5, then knight c3, c6, and now White can already play g4. And if Black takes, then bishop takes g5, and next move bishop retreats to c4. And you can see the difference between the two positions, that almost all white pieces are in the action, while for Black it's only the h6 queen and the h5 knight, which have been developed but not to the best squares, so to say. So knight h4 was not ideal, but Black also didn't react in the best way. He played queen to g5. So it's a double attack on the knight and the bishop, but it's very easy to get out of this problem with White, since anyway the knight was going to f5. So I believe the very logical and the very simple best move in this position was just to play g6, preventing the knight to jump to f5, and then to play bishop e7, attacking the knight on h4, and just having a very comfortable position. Instead queen g5, knight f5, and now c6 was played. It's a good move. And White played g4, counter-attacking, also very typical for those times, that your first idea when your piece was under attack is not necessarily to move it, but to either to sacrifice it or just to counter-attack the opponent's piece. Nevertheless, in my opinion, the best move was bishop a4. So it's again important to note that if the bishop is going back to the original, to the most active diagonal, then this d5 idea is very strong from black. So bishop a4, g6, knight to g3, using the pin on the queen. Knight takes g3, h takes, queen takes, knight c3, and I believe white has a pleasant position. Again, ahead in development, knight e2 is an idea, and black is facing some issues with his development. So g4 was played, knight to f6, and rook to g1. So now the queen is in a difficult situation. Not many squares are available after an attack like h4, only g6. And that's why it was time for black to make sure that the queen has some safe squares. He played c takes b5 in the game, which is a mistake. So the best move was to play h5. So white plays h4 and queen g6. And once g5 is coming, now this knight can jump to g4. And suddenly that's a pretty nice outpost for the knight. And also the queen on g6 in a safe square. It cannot be attacked. It has extra squares on h7 or e6. And black is going to play d5 in the next move with a very complicated game. Absolutely acceptable position for black. So instead cb5 was played, h4, queen g6, h5, queen to g5, only square for the queen, and now queen f3, threatening to play bishop takes f4 and trapping the queen on g5. And it's a very hard task for black to create a square for this queen. The only piece which can do that is the knight, but the knight can only go to one square, and that is to g8, to create this d8 square for the queen. And bishop takes f4, d8 or f6, sorry, so those squares in the diagonal. So Kieseritzky played queen to f6 here. He could have played queen d8, and we would reach a really picturesque position. So basically after move 15, all of the black pieces are on their starting positions. So even though black is up a full piece here, it's hard to consider this position, very tempting to play. So knight c3, for example, g6, and of course like knight b5 is very strong here, gf, knight c7, check, king e7, ef5, with a completely winning position for white. So queen f6 was played, knight c3, very nice developing move. Bishop c5, finally one minor piece is coming out, and knight d5, attacking the queen, and also knight c7 check. So queen takes b2 is basically forced, and it's a counterattack on the a1 rook. And even though again it's a full piece for black, I highlighted those 5 pieces for black who are not which are not taking part in the game. So it's really tough to count it as a full piece up for black. It's rather white who is ahead in material, so to say, because the relative value of the pieces are just much higher for white here. And here a highly impractical, nevertheless brilliant move was played, which is working again, I would say, like this. So if you look at the history of chess, so at the beginning it looked like probably it's a brilliant move. Then some stronger players came and probably refuted this idea, and also engines refuted this idea, like at the beginning. But when the really strong engines came, this bishop d6 absolutely brilliant move is objectively even good again. So I have to say the move is highly impractical. It's beautiful, but it would be just much easier to not to give up that rook with the check and just to play rook e1. And in case of bishop b7, just to play d4. I mean, the position is relatively similar to the game, but white has 2 extra rooks, so it never hurts. So it's harder to miscalculate or misunderstand the position in such cases. The bishop takes d4, knight d6, king f8, and after bishop c1, it's mate on f7, or white is winning the queen on b2. So that was the easiest way, but bishop d6 was the brilliant way to play. Black played bishop g1, which is actually not asking any serious questions. The best move from black is queen takes a1 check, king e2. And here taking on g1 would just transpose to the game, as we will see, but queen b2 was a nice defensive move. So the idea is that if white takes on c5, for example, in this position, then the queen takes with a check on c2 and can retreat to the defense with queen takes c5. So basically, white has to spend an extra move, a quiet move in this position, and that is king to d2. And amazingly, black still cannot do anything, even though white kind of just makes a defensive move in the middle of the attack. So here bishop takes g1, white plays e5. So now we have the mate threat, which I will not show because that's the way how the game will finish, so I don't want to spoiler that. But black plays bishop a6, it prevents the mate. And now bishop b4 is the only move, an absolutely amazing move. Black is up 2 rooks and the minor piece, and nevertheless cannot do anything against the white threat. So the best variation I could find is to sacrifice the queen like this, but black is losing further material, and what is even more problematic is that the attack is continuing. So it was still objectively good. So now let's see how the game went. It went bishop takes g1, e5, queen takes a1, so this is the transposition I was talking about. Now king to e2 was played, and black played knight a6. And here comes the brilliant mate of Anderssen. He took on g7, king t8, queen f6 check. It has to be taken by the knight, and bishop e7 is a mate. So the king cannot escape because of the knight on d5 is covering the c7 square. And if now you remember to the previous variation I showed, when the good move for black was to play bishop to a6, now you see the idea that it prevented the checkmate because it vacated the c8 square for the king. So that's how this game finished, with this very nice bishop e7 checkmate.